just some background on the Natural History Institute's involvement in the extraction project. We signed on about 2 years ago through Tom Fleischner, the founding director's friendship with Jane Hirschfield, who is one of the instigators. And then we really didn't know what was going to happen because the pandemic, and 2 years went by. And then we said, you know, this is such a powerful idea that we really want to do something. So what we ended up doing is inviting artists that were involved already with the Natural History Institute. So everybody whose art that you'll see this evening has either had an exhibition at the Institute, will have an exhibition at the Institute, or is curating an exhibition coming up, or is in a group show. So, or is like Diane and me, and I guess we're the other category. We're on the gallery council. So that's a teeny bit of the background of NHI's involvement. What is the extraction project? So I wanted to just read to you from the founders' essay in the book about this project. Extraction, Art on the Edge of the Abyss, is a year-long global coalition of artists and creators committed to shining a light on the effects of extractive industry in all its myriad forms, from mining and drilling to the reckless plundering and exploitation of water, soil, trees, marine life, and other natural resources across the globe. A multimedia, multi-venue, cross-border art intervention. The project will provoke change by exposing and interrogating extraction's negative social and environmental consequences. But of course, extraction, I think to most of us who have thought much about it, is not just the literal plundering of the earth, but it's a mindset or an attitude that the world is there for our plundering. The attitude that humans stand above creation rather than being an integrated part of it all. At the Natural History Institute, all the work we do is rooted in the careful, loving, and joyous attention we give to the more than human world. And we work with a belief in the world-changing power of our respect and of our humility, and in living in reciprocity rather than dominance. Thus, we're looking at artistic intervention as a counterbalance to the extractive mindset. And that includes celebrations of joy, beauty, and revealed detail, in addition to the human reactions of pain, grief, and anger that we all feel who are paying attention. It's easy for an artist to wonder in this time of environmental crisis, what is the purpose of what we do? Are we just fiddling on the deck of the Titanic as we go down, just entertaining people, just making pretty things for over the couch? Or is there some other reason that what we do is important? So I want to read another quote from the project originator, Peter Koch. He says, "I believe artists are morally and ethically called to imagine alternative ways and worlds that, with as much persistence and innovation that we can bring to the job, will affect change. How we see the world is how we treat the world. Artists should always be seeing and making the world they want to inhabit. Nothing else can pass as art." So as far as our artists that are on the call tonight, I want to point out that seeing the world in a different way is something that all of the people do Who will see a pebble in the same way after spending time with Roger Asay and Rebecca Davis's sculpture? Or look at a flower the same way after spending time with Diane Gilbert's delicate rendering? Who will pass by the roots of a fallen ponderosa pine without a second thought if you've studied Julie Komnick's drawing? We find hope and resilience along with the willow, as seen in Kestrel Dillon's Keeper of the Creekside neckpiece, or in the exuberant beauty of Louise Grunewald's monoprints and Adele Saran's paintings. And we can better imagine changing our current trajectory after having experienced Klee Benally's Dark Mark of Manifest Destiny, or Joe McShane's St. Peter's Relic, or Ken Gorczyca's Polar Bears and Joshua Tree Forest, or the profound condemnation that is Shawn Skabelund's Overburden, stripping away the mountains and their people. The path to a different future can start at the place where we stop and look, really look at our world. If we really saw the miraculous diversity that surrounds us, how could we go on with the brutal rampage? The title of our exhibition is Beauty Passing Through Us. And that was inspired by Jane Hirschfield's poem, The Supple Deer. I invite you now to listen to Jane's reading of The Supple Deer and enjoy how these artists brought beauty through them to provide a counterbalance to the extractive mindset.
The supple deer. The quiet opening between fence strands, perhaps 18 inches. Antlers to hind hooves, 4 feet off the ground, the deer poured through. No tuft of the coarse white belly hair left behind. I don't know how a stag turns into a stream, an arc of water. I have never felt such accurate envy. Not of the deer, to be that porous, to have such largeness pass through me.
The first art we'll be looking at is that of Walt Anderson. Walt was a professor of environmental studies at Prescott College for many years. He's deeply involved with Artists for Conservation, and he is sorry about that. And he's a key voice for Save the Dells in Prescott, Arizona, where he uses his talents as a photographer and watercolor artist as part of his advocacy work.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I'm first and foremost a naturalist. I think in many ways I'm natural, and someday I'll be history. So natural history is part of my passion. And I'm trained as a scientist in many ways, but I have a passion for beauty as expressed in nature and music and language. And so this painting, this watercolor of Not Caving In, the Mountain Lion, really reflects a special animal that's somewhat reclusive and secretive, but yet very powerful. And as a predator, it has binocular gaze, which I try to capture so that you can stare right back into the eyes. We would rarely have an opportunity to see an animal like this, but I was able to study the model for this at the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. And so I have a special affinity for animals. When I'm painting, I usually start with the eyes because that's where the spirit lies. And so I work from there and then begin to interact with the animal as I continue in the painting. I certainly think that art is a way of expressing our appreciation and love and respect for nature. And I use that in many ways, as Edie implied, to engage in activism in conservation worldwide. And so I'm really glad to be part of this, and I look forward to seeing the other artists' work.
Next, collaboratively since 1983, bringing viewers into direct and intense contact with the raw materials of nature. Roger is also on the Natural History Institute Gallery Council.
As artists, Roger and I seek to create a direct visual encounter with the everyday material of our earth, to take stones or sticks and bring them into here, now, is, am, not to replace nature's varied offerings, but to override our busy minds and bring what we know and love into sharp focus. We seek to communicate boldly in a realm of experience that exists beyond words. We refer to our work as wood and stone, substance and spirit, because a direct and meaningful encounter with the stuff of life brings us into spiritual wholeness.
Black Rock Diamond, a temporary on-site construction, was created on the ephemeral floor of a Great Basin playa in eastern Oregon. The playa, alternately flooded and dry, develops beautiful patterns of deep layered cracks. As the lake seasonally dries, black dots of volcanic rock appear on the otherwise creamy lake floor. These stones scattered on the playa originate from volcanic ridges that surround the enclosed lake. Stones were collected from the dry lake floor, sorted by size, and inlaid back into the playa in a progression of gradated sizes within a 30 by 30-foot diamond shape. As the piece is alternately flooded and dried, cracks form in the playa in relation to each stone, embedding them into the playa's pattern. Elements of stone and lake, impending windstorms, rain, or snow all interact and shift in a give and take of time.
Thank you, Roger and Rebecca. Next up, we're going to look at Julie Komnick's drawing. Julie is an artist and curator whose practice engages questions about social and environmental circumstances. Her solo exhibition, Arrangement for a Silent Orchestra, has shown in various venues around the country. And she recently curated Parched, the Art of Water in the Southwest, which will be hosted by the Natural History Institute during the next year.
Thank you, Edie. First of all, I just want to actually just give deep gratitude to you, Edie, for organizing this. And I've learned through you so much about the extraction intervention. I just think it's fascinating and a great way to engage with the national project. And also it's a real pleasure to be among colleagues past and present as part of this exhibition. And am I showing up on the screen? I'm just wondering, or if we're looking at Edie.
Yeah, yes, you are. Yes.
Okay, good. I'm seeing Edie, so great, even better. But also a special shout out to Kestrel, who I've had an opportunity to interact in various capacities in the arts over the last handful of years. And what a wonderful opportunity to share the space of an exhibition and a co-panelist. So Kestrel, it's great to see you here. So as Edie said, I currently live in Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm in Maine for the summer, and with the time difference, I'll need to sign off tonight, probably before the question and answer. So sorry about that. But I'm really happy to share a new series of drawings as part of this exhibition called Uproot. It's a series of charcoal drawings of uprooted pine trees. And the images are based on ponderosa pine trees in Flagstaff's Coconino National Forest that were downed in a violent windstorm last fall in 2020. Of course, the downed trees expose what you're not used to seeing with the ponderosa pine trees, but all of you here probably are very familiar with the fact that the way that the ponderosa pines are so resilient in dry, high elevation areas is by a very expansive, widespreading root system with a very deep taproot, which all gets shown when they blow over in the wind. And, you know, these were just trees that I would observe. You know, there's probably 100 trees down along my running route that I run frequently, and I would, you know, see them every day, and I was fascinated by them, and then realized that that fascination would transfer into, you know, what I love to do, which is drawing, but also in retrospect that these images metaphorically really reflected the turbulent fall season of 2020 at the time of the storm, which of course was shrouded in a global health emergency, the climate crisis, political upheaval, the presidential campaign, civil unrest. So I was thinking about the ponderosa pines as being a metaphor for everything that was happening, and also questioning, you know, what circumstances can weaken even the strongest stature of an organism that is so typically resilient. And in terms of the extraction intervention, I think it's just really fascinating to observe, you know, the patterns of nature, the history of nature's patterns, which is very literally natural history, as an alarm or a signal for what lies ahead. So we often think of the metaphor of the canary in the coal mine, but just to think about what other symbols does nature provide and how to pay close attention to them and take action. So thank you for including me in this project.
Thanks, Julie. That image shows up a lot better on the website. Somehow it didn't translate with all the detail there. So please go on over there and take a look at that. Am I next? I think I am. My piece is called Grief is Love. And I'm fascinated by the oak ponderosa or oak pine communities that are found all over the world. You find oaks and pines growing together in the Southeast. You find them in China. You find them in India. They're just, they seem to be friends. And that may seem very anthropomorphic or zoo or whatever it is when it's a plant, but it made me think about how trees communicate, and we're finding out a lot more about tree communication, how they communicate underground, through the roots, through chemical messages, through funguses, through their branches and pheromones, and even through electrical impulses. And there's just so much we don't know about the natural world. And I think that this is just an example of what we don't know. The title of the piece comes from this quote by filmmaker Chris Jordan. I came to discover that grief is not sadness. Grief is love. Grief is a felt experience of love for something lost or that we are losing. That is an incredibly powerful doorway. I think we all carry that abiding ocean of love for the miracle of our world. And if on a collective level, we could grieve together and rediscover that part of our collective psyche, then healing the symptoms of the disconnect in our feelings for the world could happen much faster than anyone could imagine. And unfortunately, it seems that for humans to really love something, it tends to have to look like them. And so I did make this in a humanoid form. It's a tree person in a human form. But there's a mirror, you can see a little bit in the different woodpecker holes there. There's a mirror in each one of those, which brings us back and reflects back our connection. Thank you all for being here. And I'm going to introduce next Kestrel Dillon, a recent graduate of Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. with a degree in jewelry design. Her work is grounded in a sense of place in the Mogollon Highlands of Arizona, where she maintains a studio.
Hi, everybody. You can hear me, right? Well, thank you so much for having me be a part of this, and thank you, Julie, for that acknowledgement. Julie was my first art teacher, so it's pretty special to be sharing this space with her and so many other amazing artists, as well as Edie, who has also been a very special teacher of art in my life. So as Edie said, I've been studying jewelry design, and I think that jewelry is such a special and unique medium because the innate intimacy that jewelry provides, and it's something that is able to move with you that not a lot of other art forms can do in the same way. So for this piece that I made, I really wanted to make something that was symbolic, but also kind of invited the wearer to become a part of its environment. So it wraps around them, invites them in, and also simultaneously is kind of this protector for the wearer. And I have a big affinity for willows. I think they're such a clear teacher. They're, flexible in harsh conditions. They bend with the flood, and it's this flexibility that makes them so resilient. I believe that's like a really strong philosophy to be approaching and interacting with the world in that way of noticing and flexibility, especially in the times that we're living in. So yeah, thank you for listening. We're getting a really exciting, our first storm of the summer is dumping outside right now, and it's a great background to this. So thanks for listening.
Deborah Springstead Ford recently retired from being the executive director of Playa in Summer Lake, Oregon, a residency program for artists. She's been an art advocate, an educator, and a program administrator, in addition to a very, very active arts practice as a photographer. And she's in a couple of other extraction events that I think you'll probably find if you Google her name.
All right, thank you. And I'm honored to be again with colleagues and friends, longtime friends that I haven't seen, and this is wonderful. Thank you, Edie. And yes, much of my earlier work was photographing in the Powder River Basin for 8 years, and where oil and gas exploration was expanding exponentially. And it was pretty dreary because the habitat was ruined in so many ways. But right after that, I got to go to the biosphere and be an artist in residence. And there, the focus was on healing the earth, on finding remedies and solutions. And so the deep concern that I had and the anger that I had sort of turned to hope. And everything I did from the biosphere had to do with water and water's role in reclamation. And so this work right here, I'm continuing and working with water, but these are, I've been exploring the geothermal pools of Yellowstone, and water there is really powerful because of the microorganisms, and the microorganisms are what give these things their color. And so there are thermophiles, which are just heat loving, and extremophiles, which are heat or extreme heat or acid loving. And it changes so much. And it's these microorganisms, and they've already led to significant discoveries. And as you know, that even now they're looking on Mars and near moons and things for trying to take soil samples and rock samples because then it tells us about the organisms that were there. And the only issue, I mean, and so, you know, they're looking for cures for diseases and answers to early life. And so they're doing that in Yellowstone, but they're also doing it, you know, on the planets. And so it raises the other issue of another extraction industry. You know, and so it's, you know, it's just another method of extraction that maybe people don't notice as much. But thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Diane Gilbert is up next. Diane was a weaving instructor at Yavapai College from 1988 to 2009, but her delicate and sensitively rendered sculptures made primarily from played guitar strings break way out of the form. Diane is on the Natural History Institute Gallery Council, and I'm just really thrilled that she's got a piece in this show.
So thank you for I'm glad to be here too. So the work in this series, which I began in 2017, was driven by a desire to find expression for the sheer exuberance of life force. And as my sculptures began to take on plant-like forms, I became more interested in botany and how plants grow. But when I'm working, I try to let my responses to the natural world come through me rather than following a plan. And I let my hands and the materials make the decisions. So you might be wondering what this has to do with extraction. And I find that living in a world of ongoing, escalating devastation makes me view everything with conflicting feelings. In that context, artwork can take on new meanings. And when I completed this little sculpture called Cloud Forest, it embodied the joy of seeing a real cloud forest with treetops drinking from the clouds and plants growing on plants and so much moisture that plants could actually grow in the air. But I also know cloud forests are endangered not only by climate change, but by timber extraction due to the demand for charcoal. And so joy and grief struggle to coexist. And, you know, I find everything I look at and love in nature, I have that mix anymore. What we know about the world colors how we feel. And so I wonder if the magical, miraculous life force expressed by every plant can inspire us to be better stewards of the earth. It was actually the title of NHI's contribution to this extraction project that prompted me to enter these pieces. So the intervention I have in mind would be the intervention of beauty.
Thank you, Diane. Next up, Ken Gorczyca. Ken is a veterinary doctor, who's also a strong advocate of the human-animal bond. He loves painting animal companions and endangered animal species. This piece, Polar Bears in the Joshua Tree Forest. Take it away.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ken Gorczyca, and I'm a painter. I started painting at 7 years of age when my grandfather introduced me to paint by numbers in the 1960s. It sort of ages me. And that was connected to my passion at that point. But I wear many hats. I'm also a veterinarian, and I've studied meteorology and climate change. And it's an honor to be invited to participate with all of you in extraction. And thanks, Edie, for curating this art show for the Natural History Institute. So what do you think about when you visualize a polar bear? Do you see the world's largest bear species, or perhaps the largest mammalian carnivore? Or does climate change and the melting of the Arctic ecosystem come to mind? Maybe some of you worry about the mass Holocene extinction caused by human oil extraction. There are currently 30,000 polar bears in the wild today, And the Arctic ice is decreasing by 4% a year. And polar bears are expected to be extinct in the wild by the year 2100. But I believe there's still hope. If the humans address climate change now, we still could prevent polar bear extinction and suffering. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the iconic book, Art and Physics, A Parallel Vision in Space, Time, and Light by Leonard Shlain. He lays out the facts that artists have always painted our future. He describes how artists painted the laws of physics before it was discovered by scientists. And I believe that each of us is doing the same as environmental artists through the Extraction Art on the Edge of the Abyss exhibition. So let's move on to my painting titled Polar Bears Hunting in the Joshua Tree Forest. Polar bears are an iconic species representing the suffering and torment of our warming planet. As the sea ice melts, they are being forced to carve out a new life on land with unfamiliar dangers and starvation. Rising sea temperatures are directly related to man-made greenhouse emissions. And this polar bear family finds itself in a strange desert landscape surrounded by Joshua trees and long shadows while trying to hunt for seal and salmon. One can ponder if these bears are lost in a future landscape, or are they spirits of an extinct species? As I paint portraits of nature and animals, I sit on the ground, on the earth, and I use both brush and knife to help me craft thick textures of built up acrylic paint with bright colors and deep shadow that come through me onto the canvas. I want to create paintings that call for action now. And this was one of my first attempts at using collage and plein air painting in Joshua Tree. And it just felt really perfect for this to share in this exhibition with you. So thanks for letting me share my passion as an environmental artist, veterinarian, and a meteorologist. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Louise, you're up next. Louise Grunewald teaches calligraphy and design workshops nationally and maintains her studio called Western Hands in Durango, Colorado.
So first of all, thank you all. I'm so impressed with what I've seen so far, these beautiful works. And I had something to say that now I have to change because I didn't realize 3 of my pieces would be shown. These are all solar prints. I am a printmaker. And I love what Diane said about intervention of beauty. And I also noticed how many plants and trees are in a lot of the other works. So I think we're all moved by that. The images that I make are taken from my impressions that are semi-abstract of my experiences in the out of doors. And the one I was initially going to talk about on the very left was created very spontaneously on a printing plate after skiing through an aspen grove one morning. I went back in the studio and it happened very quickly to give an impression of what I saw. And that's basically what I do with my art, is try to give an impression. These pieces are all part of a series I call My Beloved West. I was born in the West, I live in the West, I'm a Western girl. And I'm just going to read to you a text that I wrote about that after a trip I took back east a few summers ago. And I was struck by loving where I returned home to, even though we've all talked about the fears we have about what's happening to our beautiful place, and the West in particular right now with all the dangers of fire and other things. So, my beloved West, I traveled east and there I found a certain kind of lush green beauty in floral enclosure. But returning to my beloved West, I found a longer view of mountains and canyons and rushing rivers and sky and stars, where a single blooming claret cup, intoxicating as a fine red wine, could rival 100 rhododendrons. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Well, our next artist is Joseph McShane, and he wasn't able to be here, but he recorded his statement for us. Joe McShane created the first art in space in 1984. He launched aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. Space sculpture G38 was created by a computer command in orbit as an extension of McShane's eye and hand in direct response to the vacuum and weightlessness of the outer space environment. His career spans 6 decades and includes complex, large-scale environmental sculptures utilizing materials and techniques appropriate to each sculpture project. Now, just to get a sense of scale for you here, this piece is 3.5 inches across, but Joe makes really, really big sculptures too. So it's quite a span of skills. So if Christina, you can play his statement.
St. Peabody's relic, the last fragment of the true coal, was created in 1974 in a series of wearable fetishes made not of feathers, bones, and stone, but of Industrial Revolution objects, metals, nuts, bolts, and magnifying lenses. St. Peabody's relic envisions a time in the distant future when all coal has been extracted from the earth and has become so lost in mythology that Mr. Peabody has become canonized and fragments of the true coal are objects of veneration. It is a reflection on the price paid for the extraction of natural resources, exemplified by the struggles and destruction wrought by the Peabody Coal Company on Black Mesa and the role played by Prescott College.
I think Joe might be watching out there, so thank you very much for this prescient piece. We'll go next to Adele Saran's work.
St. Peabody's relic.
And I'm going to go ahead and read Adele's statement. Adele was a painter, a poet, and a community and environmental activist. She created a bold body of work as an artist and also founded Gardens for Humanity in Sedona. She held a profound belief in the healing power of the arts. Adele passed away in 2019, and I'll try to do justice to her words. I believe all great art is transformative in that it inspires the beholder and enriches the society in which it is created. Undoubtedly, great artists are themselves charged and quickened in the process of working. Dillon Thomas wrote, "I write for the love of man and in praise of God, and I'd be a damn fool if I didn't." I believe that the arts are a way of thanking all of our senses for being alive, of connecting with each other and with all of nature, of listening to our souls. I think of the arts as life skills essential to meeting the challenges of our age of transformation. Art is color, it is dancing, my breathing in of wonder, of being in love with color, movement, energy. It is an outpouring of sometimes wild, unkempt brushstrokes of oil paint, sometimes an occasional delicacy of line. When painting works for me, I'm not thinking about it at all. I am just moving with the color, becoming the subject. I am the paint. My mission is to wake people up to the beauty of our earth, to fill them with curiosity, to learn about the diverse and fascinating habits and customs of all living creatures and their habitats. It is about how to love and how much we all need each other. Unfortunately, much art today reflects too often the commercial, cynical, or sadistic qualities in contemporary society, making waves of visual or audio static. Therefore, we are challenged to find in new art the nucleus of spiritual awakening, which can fire, astonish, and transform us with wonder and the need to create. Much gratitude to Adele. gone too soon. Our next artist is Shawn Skebelan. And Shawn is also a curator and a very active installation artist and an astonishing renderer. If you see his drawings, he was the one of the curators of the exhibit that was at Coconino Center for the Arts called Art and Trauma. I'm sorry, Shawn, I'm doing 4 things at once.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Hope and trauma.
Hope and trauma about the nuclear mining, the uranium mining in Navajo lands and the effects of that on the people. He also co-curated an exhibition about the fires that are happening all over the West, and that was a number of years ago. Anyway, this one I think is just a super powerful work, and I hope you can get up close and look at those details, and I'll give it to him to describe this piece. I want to also mention that Shawn is going to be showing at the Natural History Institute, we hope sometime in the fall when the gallery opens again.
Thank you, Edie, for inviting me to share my work with you guys and with those listening out there and watching. When I was invited to do this, I had a hard time deciding which of the 80 installations I've done would fit best. And then for some reason I chose this one. My work explores what Wendell Berry calls the unsettling of America, namely the effects, the marks, and the changes humans make on the land and cultures of a given area. For over 30 years, I've been creating site-specific, place-based installations, which have explored the history of mining in different landscapes throughout the US and the impact that mining has had on the cultures and peoples who live within those landscapes. Following my 2012 installation, The Price of Entrance, which explored the history of uranium mining within the greater ecosystem of Grand Canyon and inside the park, my desire was to create an installation which focused on mountaintop removal mining and addressed the social, cultural, and environmental impacts of whole mountains being destroyed due to the destructive nature of this type of coal mining. The images that you see are from my 2015 installation in Bray, Kentucky. Overburden, stripping away the mountains and their people, represents the collusion between federal and state governments and fossil fuel companies, institutions which have failed to protect the communities and the people who live within those mountains and the watersheds that sustain them. My installation memorialized the more than 500 mountains that have been destroyed through mountaintop removal mining in Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, and West Virginia. Using overburden dust collected from one of those mines, I tried to give memory to these mountains by drawing out their names on the gallery floor. The photo seen in the background of the installation was taken by Amy Vitale for her project, The Cost of Coal. It is an image of a mountain above the former town of Lindytown, West Virginia. Thank you.
I wanted to say at the beginning of Shawn's introduction, before I lost my piece of paper, that he has been engaged with this kind of work, this extraction issue, in all of his art for so many years. So go back if you can get onto his website and look at his work going back in time. Klee is calling in from phone, so it may be a little hard, but please hang in there. Benally is a Dene musician, traditional dancer, artist, filmmaker, and indigenous anarchist. He currently lives in Flagstaff, Arizona, but is originally from Black Mesa and has worked nearly all his life at the front lines in struggles to protect indigenous sacred lands. I just got a message from him on text that said it was fine, and then the connection went out. So I'm going to go ahead and read the statement that goes with this piece. He says, I took John Gast's infamous 1872 painting that quite literally is the visual definition of manifest destiny, and placed the Dementor from the world of Harry Potter to disrupt the existent post-colonial narrative. In many ways, these are complementary fictions. A Dementor is a force that sucks all happiness from life and spreads a deep sense of hopelessness and despair, and manifest destiny is just invader settler code for genocide. And if you look on the website for our exhibit, you can see the original John Gast painting that has a little fluttery Columbia bringing light to the darkness of the West. And that was then. So there you have the full URL of the exhibition. You can go and enjoy the whole thing and read everybody's artist statement that goes with various different pieces. And I just want to say in closing, before we go to the question and answer, which maybe we'll just take a few because it's 9 o'clock. The Natural History Institute and its artists invite you to also let beauty pass through you, and then pick up your tools, whether they are clay, silver, stone, glass, played guitar strings, your vote, your voice, in whatever way you can. Extraction is our past and present, but it doesn't have to be our future. In the way of comments and questions. Okay, first, Laurel Freeman wants to know, what is the size of Diane's sculpture?
It takes up a space that's about 24 by 24 by maybe 13-inch high.
Any conversation between the panelists?
Amazing work, everybody. It's great to be with you here.
I'm going to go ahead and thank everybody for coming. Thank everybody so much for being in this exhibit and for showing up for this slightly awkward Zoom opening tonight. And I just, so much gratitude to each of you. It's amazing to me that artists approaching this topic from so many different directions bring light and shed light and hopefully inspire some thought. And just much appreciation, and much appreciation to the Natural History Institute for hosting this exhibition. And know too that the Natural History Institute Gallery will be opening sometime soon. We hope in the fall, once all this craziness is clearly over. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Bob. And again, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Edie.
Thank you, Edie.
Thank you, Edie.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Edie. And thanks to all the artists as well. The Natural History Institute is a place where we integrate art, science, and humanities. And so we welcome your support. You can go over there to our website, hit that donate button, help us out, or maybe you want to purchase some of this art. So once again, thank you and good night. Hope to see you around.